Guys, what's going on? Welcome to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath, and in this video, we're going to talk about 4 new releases from Scream Factory. These are 4 fresh Screams, including Universal Horror Collection Volume 1, The Monolith Monsters, Monster on Campus, and last but certainly not least, this is actually my favorite of the entire haul, This Island Earth on Blu-ray. Fire up your Interocitor, reach out to Metaluna. This Island Earth is finally on Blu-ray, and it is the edition this movie deserves. So let's just get into these. The one that I think is the highest prestige, the most celebrated, is the Universal Horror Collection Volume 1. It started life as the Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi collection. There was a DVD set. I believe it had 5 movies on it. It was different movies. But these come from Universal's catalog era. Of course, Boris Karloff was Frankenstein's monster. Bela Lugosi was Dracula, the iconic Dracula. And so in the 30s, they had a pretty good run at Universal, and they teamed up in several movies. These are 4 of them. And so this started life when this was first solicited. This was solicited as the Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi collection. And it had different artwork, and it has morphed over time into the Universal Horror Collection Volume 1. And I'm not exactly sure what the reason behind some of that was. I don't know if it was a Universal thing or if it was a Scream Shout Factory thing, but essentially, we now have 3. We know that there will be a minimum of 3 of these Universal Horror collections, which is fantastic news because these movies are underappreciated, in my opinion. These come from the golden age of horror, from Universal, who was the studio that was most closely associated with horror. It's kind of the house that horror built, right? It's the Universal House of Horrors. Look what I just did there, all by accident. And so for this particular release, Volume 1, Scream Factory, they're interchangeable, right? Has really pulled out all the stops for this because, okay, so there's The Black Cat, which is, I think most of us agree The Black Cat is the most famous, the best movie on this collection. The Black Cat is crazy, you guys. Boris Karloff is like the Satanist on this house on a hill. Bela Lugosi is the jilted guy he has an axe to grind with Boris Karloff. There's like weird incest stuff. There's the preservation of dead bodies. There's these late night rituals, and mild spoilers, someone gets skinned alive in this movie. It is insane. And so we finally have this on Blu-ray. It has 2 new audio commentaries, and there's a 4-part documentary that runs through all 4 films. That's kind of divided into chunks, but if you put them together, it's basically like 1 hour-long documentary. But it's divided into segments and really focusing on that Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi team-up period when they had kind of a rivalry, kind of a respect for each other. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't an angry kind of a rivalry, but I think that they both had some feelings about, they both wanted to be the top star. They both maybe had a little jealousy back and forth. It was a really interesting, complicated relationship. Anyway, The Black Cat is obviously the one that people talk about. The Raven is another one on here that I like a lot. It's Bela Lugosi plays this guy that's inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. He builds a torture chamber in this basement of this building. It's another one that's really crazy. One of the things that come out, so The Invisible Ray is the 3rd movie, and Black Friday is the 4th movie. Black Friday comes from 1940, so I'm going to discount that or kind of separate that from what I'm about to say. But some of these movies, these early to mid-30s movies, it is insane what they were allowed to get away with under the code. The Hays Code, the Decency Code, the Decency Police, as I like to call them. I guess people just weren't paying attention because there's some really, really disturbing things in these movies that these movies were approved for wide release. In fact, I believe that it was The Raven. And now listen, I'm not a historian. I believe it was The Raven that was so controversial in England that it kind of put a stop on horror in England for a while. So these are very influential movies. These are very important movies. And for those of us who love the history of horror, you don't get better than Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi sharing the screen together. That's about as good as it gets. So as I'm recording this video, actually as I'm releasing this video, Volume 2 has now dropped. I do not have it in my possession yet, but I am going to pick it up and I will cover it for you guys. I will say Volume 2 does not have nearly the prestige around it that Volume 1 has. This is really, you can tell that Scream Factory had big plans for this, from the Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi collection origins of it to what it became. You can just tell that there was a lot of enthusiasm and a big push. A lot of these come from new 2K scans. I think the only one that doesn't have a new 2K scan is the Black Cat, and it still looks really good. It still looks like HD. It's got, you can see the grain. Like, I love all that stuff. By the way, new audio commentaries, like Black Cat has 2 audio commentaries, Raven has 2 audio commentaries, Invisible Ray has 1 audio commentary, and Black Friday has 1 audio commentary. And then there are other cool extras, like the first disc, The Black Cat, has basically a 1-hour documentary about Edgar Allan Poe adaptations on film, starting in the silent era, going all the way through these movies, Roger Corman's Edgar Allan Poe cycle with Vincent Price, through all of that. They really cover it all. It's like a film school kind of a course. Like, it's really informative. It's also got like some vintage footage, some radio stuff. There's Bela Lugosi reading an Edgar Allan Poe story in audio form. Like, really cool extras. So by the way, so this is really high prestige. Volume 2 has more obscure movies, and I don't think that they bring the volume of special features, but we'll talk about it because I'm obviously going to pick it up. And Volume 3 cannot get here fast enough. But then let's talk about the Monolith Monsters. So this is, in fact, let's talk about both of these at the same time. The Monolith Monsters and Monster on Campus. These both come from, this is 1950, I want to say this, yeah, this is 57 and this is 58. When you think about that whole Creature from the Black Lagoon kind of universal horror, where it's like the formula of like attractive young people, creature features. Okay, if you guys know like the Iron Giant, the kind of stuff that you kind of see in the Iron Giant, like the Blob, that kind of horror, that's where these come from. These are 50s horror films with the Monolith Monsters is like geology horror, where there's these there's a meteor that crashes to Earth, and something has happened chemically with that meteor when it crashed, and when it gets wet, it multiplies, kind of like Gremlins. And it's interesting because I wonder if Joe Dante was influenced by the... I guarantee you Joe Dante has seen and probably loves the Monolith Monsters because he's steeped in universal horror. But it's just an interesting correlation there. When they get wet, they multiply. And so it becomes like this thing about this race to stuff. There's like a huge rainstorm that happens in the movie, and all these huge geological rocks are rising up into the sky and crumbling and collapsing buildings. And if you get in the vicinity of it, it can turn you to stone. So it's this, it's cheesy. These movies are cheesy. Whereas some of these old school Karloff and Lugosi movies are legit disturbing. These are just fun, cheesy movies. So Monster on Campus is about he's like a science professor at a university. And there's a fossil that shows up of this old fish, and it's got this virus in it. It's got this gene in it that when he gets it in his bloodstream, and it starts to regress him to like a Neanderthal guy. And it's kind of like that Incredible Hulk kind of Frankenstein thing where the scientist turns into a monster. It's very fun, very fun. I saw both of these originally on, I think I saw these both on Svengoolie. If you guys are in America, Svengoolie is one of our last surviving late night horror hosts. He shows creature features and monster movies, and then they do like gags in between, dresses with like the long hair and the top hat and the cape and all that stuff. Kind of a throwback to an earlier time, but it's done purely for laughs. But both of these have new scans. They look adorable. They look gorgeous. Adorable is not the word. They look gorgeous. Oh, they're just adorable. Let's see. So Monolith Monsters has a new audio commentary by Tom Weaver and film music historian David Schechter. It has a new audio commentary by film historian and author Mark Jankovic. That's the interesting thing. We're getting like multiple commentaries on these releases, not just one, but like 2 commentaries. The theatrical trailer, Monster on Campus has an audio commentary by Dana M. Reeves. who wrote a book called Directed by Jack Arnold. It has Jack Arnold, of course. You guys know Jack Arnold, right? The legendary director from the 50s. New audio commentary by Professor of Film Studies, Mark Jankovic. So we got Mark Jankovic commentaries on both of these. Very cool. But what that brings us to is, like I said, my favorite of the entire batch. This Island Earth, you guys. I will say, if you only know This Island Earth from Mystery Science Theater 3000, shame on you. No, I won't be that aggressive with it, but seriously, Mystery Science Theater 3000 notoriously chopped the movie up into pieces that did not make sense and then made fun of the movie for not making sense. There's a special feature on here. There's a documentary from the people at Ballyhoo Films, which, by the way, Ballyhoo Films is like the gold standard for movie retrospective documentaries. They did the huge feature-length documentary on Waterworld, the Arrow release of Waterworld, where they chronicled the entire process of the making of that movie. It is, again, I say like it's like film school. Like, it really is. Like, they take you through the entire process, heavily researched. But Ballyhoo Films is, in my opinion, like the top of the mountain for some of this stuff. They worked on the special features for Horror Express, the Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, the movie about the train, the ghost feet, the Neanderthal spirit guy on the train. Like, they do fantastic work. And so they contributed a documentary for this. It's about 47 minutes long, I believe. And it is stunning. It is so interesting. And they talk about the whole Mystery Science Theater 3000 experience. By the way, you know who pops up over and over in that documentary? Joe Dante, because of course he does. And so they talk about the whole Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing, how Mystery Science Theater 3000 kind of ruined this movie for a lot of people because they edited it and then kind of made fun of it, and they treated it like it was a bad movie. This Island Earth is a really good movie. It has tons of interesting social relevance. I'm not going to get too deep into the plot because I would not want to rob you of that if you haven't seen it in its entire full uncut form. I think you got to check this one out. I have championed this movie for years. I had a DVD release for a long time. This wasn't even on DVD, and I'll tell you guys here, this might not be okay, but I'm on YouTube. I'm gonna do it anyway. I had a bootleg of this movie for years, like going back to early 2000s. I want to say I bought a bootleg off of eBay because I wanted the movie. But now we have it on Blu-ray. It is such a cool mishmash of monster movie, sci-fi movie, like flying saucer movie. So if you guys know the legacy of Forbidden Planet, one of probably the most famous sci-fi monster movie ever made. It's got, Robbie the Robot in it. It's a huge deal. That kind of replaced This Island Earth as the preeminent sci-fi space monster movie. Because they're both of a piece, right? They're kind of two sides of the same coin, but Forbidden Planet would be way bigger than This Island Earth. But for what it is, I just adore this movie. I think it is fantastic. I think the makeup, I think the acting, I think it just is, again, it is a little cheesy, but intentionally so. Like, these are not movies that I do not enjoy ironically watching anything. That's what I'll say about that. As far as the whole Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing goes, there's a place for that. I think there was more of a place for that in the 90s when that was new and it was just starting to happen. These days, we are drowning in irony. Watch these movies on their terms instead of laughing at them. Just try to enjoy them for what they did, what they meant. The special effects work, the matte paintings in these movies are magnifique. They're so good. So there's a new 4K scan of this movie. There's a documentary, like a little feature about the sound, the Perspecta stereophonic sound, how that existed, what it was, what it meant for movies. There's an audio commentary by Robert Skotak. There's another audio commentary. There's an audio interview with film historian David Schechter. There's an interview with the filmmaker Luigi Cozzi. And then there's the Trailers from Hell with Joe Dante. And then, of course, that stunning documentary called 2.5 Years in the Making, the extended documentary that I highly recommend. I will probably never watch this movie again without also watching the documentary on it because it is that good. So we'll leave it there. These 4 releases, there's more monster movies that have come from Scream Factory, but these are the ones that I really wanted to talk about. These are the ones that I had high on my list and that I grabbed. I pre-ordered these and I watched them like as soon as they, like, I ravenously ripped the packaging open and you know, popped these in the player because I was just so highly anticipating these. But as I continue to build my back catalog of some of the other Scream Factory monster movies from the 50s, we'll talk about those too, and we'll especially talk about the Universal Horror Collection Volume 2 when it arrives. So guys, thanks for hanging out, talking about some Scream Factory releases. Look, they just had a San Diego Comic-Con panel where they announced a bunch of new titles. They announced that Universal Horror Collection Volume 3. They announced some John Carpenter, more Hammer on Blu-ray. So I think there's 2 new Hammer movies that we've never had on Blu-ray that are hitting from Scream Factory. A lot of cool things coming. So what are you excited about? What are you watching? What are you picking up? Guys, I appreciate you very, very much. So take care, and until next time, I will catch you later.